If you listen carefully, at the end, you'll be someone else. The Great Library of Alexandria, whose destruction is said to have set humanity some 1,000 years behind, was cataclysmically burnt down in 48 before Christ under mysterious circumstances. During the time when it was at its peak of literary criticism, Aristarchus of Samothrace was its sixth head librarian. He was a devoted scholar and had the reputation of being the most influential grammarian of Homeric poetry. Having spent a major part of his life within the walls of the great library, he had a deep desire to take his last breath there. However, in 145 BC, he got caught up in a dynastic struggle and supported Ptolemy VII Neos Philopator as the worthy pharaoh of Egypt, who was later murdered and succeeded by his uncle, Ptolemy VIII Physcon. After he acceded to the throne, Physcon took to brutality and set about punishing all those who had supported his predecessor. As a result, the head librarian, Aristarchus, along with many other great scholars, were ordered to flee from the kingdom. Aristarchus was so wrathed by this severity that he cursed the pharaoh and the great library of his kingdom. "Thou have committed an unforgettable crime. By exiling the scholars, thou have stripped the great library of its soul and glory. By forcing us to part from our sacred place, thou have made us suffer. Thy kingdom will lose this ocean of knowledge within the next centennial, and one of thine own descendants shall be responsible for it. And remember, Pharaoh, this ain't no curse, but a prophecy, and thus inevitable." After that incident, Aristarchus was believed to have taken refuge on the island of Cyprus, where he died shortly after. Whether due to grief or due to an incurable dropsy is not certain. The loss of such great scholars dwindled the prestige of the great library by a large extent. However, it continued to be regarded as the great physical institution of knowledge until 48 BC. According to the historical records, Ptolemy Physcon's grandson had had 5 children, including the 2 famous pharaohs, Queen Cleopatra VII and Ptolemy VIII Theos Philopator, both of whom would later indulge in a civil war. But in actuality, he had one more illegitimate son with an obscure woman by the name of Ptolemy Runihira, born around 30 BC. Runihira had been an odd boy since childhood. More often than not, he was lost in his own world and had no fascination with reality, a kind of trait which was both unusual and unwanted in a pharaoh's child. When he grew up a little, he announced his heartiest ambition to become immortal and live for eternity. His royal folks considered this an innocent dream of a young boy and laughed it off, thinking that with time he would become more realistic and thus more pharaohish. However, Runihira didn't think the same. When he was 12, he left the royal palace and wandered off to far lands in search of the secret of immortality. He traveled far and wide, meeting thousands of scholars and wise men on his path. However, in the early 48 BC, he returned to Alexandria without success, though as determined as ever. That was the time of extreme tension between his half-siblings regarding the rulership of the kingdom. His half-brother, Ptolemy VIII Theos Philopator, had succeeded their father as the pharaoh in the spring of 51 BC, and as co-ruler with his older sister, Cleopatra VII. However, now Theos had forced Cleopatra to flee to Syria and had announced himself as the sole ruler and pharaoh. But Runihira had little to do with such frivolous things. When Cleopatra managed to contact him on the very first night of his arrival and invited him to join her army against their brother Theos, he told her off. "I have much more important things to achieve rather than being involved in such insignificant matters, Cleopatra." Queen Cleopatra looked clearly affronted. "Insignificant matters?" she asked. "You see, unlike you and Theos, my ambitions are much greater. And you tell me, who'd want to be a mere pharaoh when you could be the immortal ruler of the entire world?" he said, and looked intently at her. "I never thought that the Ptolemaic dynasty would ever be tainted with a Dysic like you," Cleopatra said severely, and marched off on her horse into the night without another word. The following morning was filled with desperation for everyone in Alexandria, for Cleopatra had officially declared a civil war against her brothers. However, Runihira's hope and excitement were higher than ever before due to a completely unrelated reason with the present civil war situation. He had heard word that a saint had been living in Alexandria for the past few days, and people claimed he had an answer to every possible question one might ask him. He also heard a rumor, which meant little to him, that he had advised his brother Theos to win the favor of Julius Caesar to win the war. As was his motto to leave no stone unturned in his quest for immortality, Runihira mounted his horse and rode off to find the answer of his lifelong search. And soon enough he found the saint sitting near the Pharos of Alexandria, gazing fixedly at the sea. He was easy to identify given his rather odd mane. His gray hair and beard covered almost all his face, giving him more of a trampish look. Runihira got off his horse and approached the man, studying him more deeply. He was well built for an old man. The little of his face which was visible appeared troubled and serene at the same time. "Accept my bow, your majesty," he said, bowing slightly without taking his eyes off the sea. His voice was calm and distant. "I'm Ptolemy Runihira, and I've come to ask you a question, wise man." The man turned to face him. His eyes were bright, and he had a crooked nose. "Go ahead, your majesty. I shall do my best to give you an answer. I have been searching for something for a long time. I've traveled to many distant lands, met a lot of scholars and saints like you on my way, but no one was able to give me a satisfactory answer as to where my search might end." There was a long pause, and Runihira expected the old man to say something, to ask him more, but he merely stared at him, then back at the sea, his face vacant. "I want to be immortal," Runihira said, breaking the silence at last. "I want to live for perpetuity, and my search is for the secret of immortality. I've waited for so long, and I'm still prepared to wait 100 years if that's what it takes. But I want to know, O wise man, about when my quest will finish and I'll reach my destination." A long silence followed this. The man seemed to consider this intently. Runihira was ready to behead him then and there if he too suggested that he, Runihira, was a Dysic and there was no secret of immortality. At last he spoke. "Certainly, you've traveled and seen much of the world in a very short span of time, your majesty. But I dare say that was all in vain." Runihira had almost pulled out his sword, but the man carried on and didn't seem to notice this. For the secret to immortality lies in your own kingdom. In my own kingdom, you say? In the great library of Alexandria, Your Majesty. And if you have the wisdom and persistence to find it, you will eventually. A new, invigorated warmth filled Runihira. His determination reached its pinnacle. His lifelong search was finally going to end. He bowed to the wise man and went straight to the great library of Alexandria. However, he soon found out that it was not as easy as it first seemed. There were more than 400,000 papyrus scrolls he'd have to search before finding what he sought. But he reminded himself what the wise man had said. Persistence was the key to his success. He was the one who swore to never give up on his quest. He was prepared to search the whole world if he had to. The library was still a little thing as compared to that. The next day he returned with some 100 men on his side. He also ordered all the scholars and staff of the great library to assist him in his search. He began spending every day in the great library from dawn to dusk, perusing every text and searching every corner of the library. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Several dozens of his allies had resigned despite the threat that resignation would mean execution. With each passing day, his determination didn't turn into hopelessness, but into fury and impatience. But he kept reminding himself of the words of the wise man. If you have the persistence to find it, you will eventually. Finally, in mid-December, he picked up the last of the scrolls and tore it apart the moment he finished reading. His whole body shook with fury. His eyes were bloodshot and acid flowed in his veins instead of blood. He had been betrayed. The hobo-like codger had lied to him. He had left no scroll unread in the entire great library, but still, he found nothing about the secret of immortality. Only 4 of his men remained with him, more out of loyalty than anything, while all others had gone to join the Civil War, which was soon to reach a bloody climax. He was offended. For the first time, his will was broken, and the reason for this was that tramp. He barked at his men to have that beggar dragged to him right away, and soon enough the old saint was brought to the great library and presented in front of him. He looked exactly like when he had first met him, the same twinkling eyes and the same vacant expression on his face. He bowed. "Your Majesty, how dare you lie to me?" Runihira's voice echoed in the great library, and his men flinched, but the old man seemed not to hear him, for he just looked slightly curious. "I never lied in my whole life, Your Majesty," he said calmly. Runihira grabbed a couple of scrolls and hurled them at his feet. "You told me that I'd find the secret of immortality in this great library, but I found nothing," he said, and kicked a huge bookshelf down. "What exactly did you expect to find, Your Majesty?" the old man said. "Or, to put it more simply, what do you think the secret of immortality actually is? Were you maybe searching for a potion which would make you immortal? Or perhaps you were trying to find a spell by chanting which you'll become immortal? You crazy old tramp, you told me." "Yes, I told you, Runihira," the saint said, raising his voice for the first time. "I told you that you'll find the secret of immortality here, but you interpreted it wrong, and that's no one's fault. What do you think immortality is? Is it just an exemption from death, is it? If you think it is, then you're the biggest fool to have ever been born on this earth. Immortals are called those who, even after dying, leave an everlasting impression of theirs in this world. And I sent you here because this great library has directed the lives of many scholars and made them immortals. Euclid of Alexandria, Archimedes of Syracuse, Eratosthenes, Xenodotus of Ephesus, Callimachus, and many more have studied here. And tell me, aren't they immortal? Their names would prevail forever, and in the true sense, they'll never die. And you know what's their secret of immortality? Their knowledge and persistence. Hardworking and determined you undoubtedly are, Runehiro. But your head is empty, and thus you can never become immortal. Runehiro looked outraged. The things which the old saint had said were too complicated for his level of understanding. What he did understand, though, was just that the old tramp had called him a fool and mocked his lifetime of hard work and dedication to his quest for immortality. Immortality is of fame, you say, he said, his voice shaking with fury. All right, then, today I, Ptolemy Runehiro, will destroy this useless edifice of my kingdom. Then my name will last forever too, won't it? But before that, I'll destroy you, he said with malice gleaming in his eyes, and pulled out his sword. Aristarchus smiled. Go ahead, he said. Runehiro marched forwards and pierced his heart with his sword. You chose your death the moment you met me, Runehiro said through gritted teeth. So did you, your majesty, Aristarchus said, and burst into flames. Runehiro stumbled backwards. The fire spread wildly around him and soon became an inferno. I am the soul of this library, Runehiro. Half of me died the day your cruel ancestor exiled the scholars, and the other half of me died the day a Dicey like you stepped in. What will burn today would just be my body, but I don't want a filthy moron like you to be known as my destroyer. So I'll self-destruct myself, as well as you. And with that, the ocean of knowledge, the great library of Alexandria, was burnt to ashes. Nobody was ever able to understand the real reason for its destruction. However, they blamed it on Caesar's troops, who had set fire to the fleet of wharves in Alexandria at the same time. But what nobody knows is that the two fires were unrelated and never touched each other. As for Runehiro, he suffered a fate worse than death. He didn't just die. He was obliterated from the world. Nobody ever remembered him again. He was erased from the royal records as well as from everyone's memories. The man who sought to be immortal was gone for good, without a single trace of him left. And nowhere in the world was he mentioned again, for he never really existed.